So a tweet was doing the rounds on Doctor Who Twitter over the past couple of days, and I don't want to put a target on anyone's back. I'm not going to show the tweet on screen or who it was from, because I mainly want to use it as a jumping off point for a broader discussion about how Chris Chibnall used the role of the companions during the Jodie Whittaker era of Doctor Who, the 13th Doctor era of Doctor Who, from Series 11 to Series 13 in the 2022 specials. So the tweet, I'll just read it. The pre-2017 New Who formula, where the male Doctor is this amazing superhero and the female companion is the assistant who occasionally saves the day but is mainly relevant because of some sci-fi mystery surrounding her, is highly sexist, and I don't want to go back to that. So this tweet was done by a massive 13th Doctor stan, so it's why it isn't quite representative properly of what Doctor Who was before 2017. Now, I get the sentiment that the idea of the male Doctor and the female companion who is mainly there because of some sci-fi mystery, that has been the case for a couple of companions in the past, and by a couple of companions, I mean Clara. Clara was basically the most important woman in the universe who was less a character and more a title for Tumblr to share around in the early 2010s. The Impossible Girl, and there was the girl who waited, Amy Pond as well, had the crack in her wall, and Rose Tyler to a lesser extent became the bad wolf, but that was a twist, and that wasn't an inciting thing that made her interesting to the Doctor. This is more or less a Moffat thing. Stephen Moffat during his tenure was not a very progressive writer when it comes to the gender politics. I think that Moffat did lean on this trope a little bit too heavily in the past, River Song, Amy, and Clara. However, those are definitely the exceptions that prove the rule for the Doctor-companion relationship. Bill does not fall into this category. Donna Noble does not fall into this category. I guess you could maybe argue she does because she encounters the Doctor again, and then that becomes the universe bringing them together and stuff for Series 4. But yeah, this is not this is not Martha Jones, this is not what she does, it's not Nardole, it's not Rory. So it does feel like a little bit of a tunnel vision. I'm going to select a couple of examples of this bad thing and apply it to all of pre-2017, pre-13th Doctor Who. It's a disingenuous framing, but it does have that little glimmer of truth to it. But I did want to talk about how the post-2017 New Who formula, where we have a female Doctor with these companions who are more or less just along for the ride, the fam, as they were referred to. And the fam, over the course of the 13th Doctor's run, we had Graham, played by Bradley Walsh, Ryan, played by Tosin Cole, Yaz, played by Mandip Gill, and we also had Dan the Plasterer from Liverpool, played by John Bishop. I will say up front that I liked the characters, independently. I liked the characters, I liked the fam. I also liked how they were applied in Series 11 for the most part. I think that making Doctor Who for that season more akin to an ensemble cast was a really effective way to mix up the template of what had at that time been a show that had been on TV consistently for around 12 years. I think having the flat team structure conceptually is a really good way to mix up the formula. And I think Chibnall and the group in Series 11, they hit the ground running for that and did a really good job. You forgot Evil Dan? Oh yeah, Evil Dan and Dan they've never been seen in the same room though. Having a larger supporting cast, a larger TARDIS team, which harkens back to season 1 of Doctor Who, where you had the Doctor, Susan, Ian and Barbara, and that was an ensemble show bordering on Ian being the main character of that season. With the fam, when looking back retroactively at their dynamic with the Doctor, they're really interesting to sort of analyse and break down, because they really were spare parts for the most part, where they were essentially along with the ride, where the 13th Doctor comes up with all of the plans, takes point, and instructs the fam on what to do in order to win the day, in order to save the day and stop the alien threat for that particular week. What you have, though, is that the companions are not really active agents in the narrative. Now, people were saying, well, you're on about Mr. TARDIS, of course they've got agency. That's not what I said. I said that they were not active agents in the narrative. They did have agency independent of each other, though. For example, Ryan going to talk with his dad in Resolution, Yasmin Khan in It Takes You Away, using her police training in order to talk to Hannah properly, and also Bradley Walsh being able to use his connections at the bus stop and everything to find people, and to also have his own little subplot in Arachnids in the UK about Grace. They did have agency, and they would occasionally do things independently of each other. But these things basically never contributed towards the A plot of the story. Outside of the odd superficial thing, okay, Yaz just so happens to get involved in the plot of It Takes You Away because she learns about Hannah's past and Hannah's family and how she got to where she is. But Yaz, Graham, and Ryan don't really contribute to the saving of the day at the end. The Doctor basically takes charge and comes up with all of the plot resolutions in all of the episodes of Series 13. I think when it comes to the companions actually saving the day at the end, the closest you get is the power of the Doctor, when Yaz does bring the Doctor back and do the body swap with the Master and the Doctor, and then carries the Doctor off of the cyber planet into the TARDIS and everything. However, in that story, you still have the Hollow Doctor coming up with the ideas and taking point and telling them what to do. The fam were basically extensions of the Doctor's body, in that the Doctor can only be in one place at a time, for the most part. In the Power of the Doctor, she's the Hollow Doctor, so she's in multiple places. In the Vanquishers, she splits herself up into 3 Doctors so that she can be in all of the subplots. So the companions actually don't really contribute towards the resolution of any story in the Chibnall era, outside of the Doctor telling them what to do and them doing it. It's like, okay, in Rosa, which I actually think is a really good example of the flat team structure, the Doctor comes up with the idea on how to have history go back to its present course and to stop Krasko, but she comes up with the ideas and tells Graham and Ryan and Yaz and tells them what to do and where to go. They don't really come up with the ideas. In the Ghost Monument, they're along for the ride. In Arachnids in the UK, the Doctor tells Ryan and Graham, okay, we need to trap the giant spider, so they go and trap the giant spider. In Resolution, Ryan does save his dad at the end by taking his hand in the TARDIS door, but it was the Doctor's idea to go to the supernova to try and kick the Dalek out. Their contributions to the plot and the stories are basically nothing. But, companions don't always have to be super vital to the resolution of plots. For example, I don't really think that Amy does anything in The Vampires of Venice to contribute towards the plot. But you make up for that in 2 different ways. One, you do it in different episodes, like stories like The Girl Who Waited and Amy's Choice don't function without Amy Pond there. But also in Vampires of Venice, you've got the relationship and the fractured romance between her and Rory, and all that romantic chemistry. You make up for it in different ways. But the companions, the fam in the 13th Doctor's era, don't really do that. And one reason why they don't do that is because the 13th Doctor refuses to let them in. Literally, Ryan, Graham, Yaz, and Dan do not learn anything about the Timeless Children. They don't figure that out. The 13th Doctor never tells them. They don't even know, as far as I'm aware, that the Master destroys Gallifrey. They just go to Gallifrey at the end of Ascension of the Cybermen, beginning of the Timeless Children, but it's just a destroyed planet that just happens to be Gallifrey from their perspective. It has no emotional attachment to, oh, this is where the Doctor's from. Oh, her best friend, her worst enemy, destroyed the planet. And in several stories, they actually draw attention to the fact that the companions have nothing to do, and they don't really have any proper connection to the Doctor. In Spyfall, the companions spend half of that story sitting around a construction site, wondering, hey, that Doctor, she's never really told us who she is. Yeah. And then that's the scene. And in Revolution of the Daleks, they try and speak to Jack Robertson. It doesn't work, and then they just go to a living room and okay, I guess we're going to wait for the Doctor to turn up from space jail. The tagline for Revolution of the Daleks, the early marketing was, how do you save the world without the Doctor? It turns out you don't. You just wait for her to turn up. The Timeless Children, they get split up from the Doctor, the fam. They go to Kosharmus and the Cybermen invade, and Ryan's story arc of being able to throw a basketball comes dividends, I guess. But they meander in that subplot, go to Gallifrey, but they don't break the Doctor out of the Matrix. The Doctor does it by herself, and then as she breaks out, the companions find her in that room, and then the Doctor sends them home. And then Ko-Sharmus, the supporting character of the day, makes the sacrifice play. You've got that pirate in Legend of the Sea Devils who sacrifices himself. The companions don't do anything. Like, they are just around to ask questions, to get some exposition across, and occasionally pay lip service to their character dynamics and their individual character traits. Like, okay, Yaz says that she's formerly of Hallamshire Police at the beginning of the Halloween Apocalypse. When did she leave? Why did she leave? And why aren't the audience seeing any of that play out? I think one of the biggest contributions a companion plays across the entirety of the 13th Doctor's era is Dan teaming up with Carvanista to take down the Doctor Sontarans in Liverpool. But even then, once he gets onto the Sontaran ship, which is probably the most a companion has independently done across the entire era, the Doctor calls the ship. Dan happens to be there, and they make a video call and they talk to each other. And then the Doctor tells him what to do, and then it's back to the standard dynamic. Now, were the fam fun characters? I would say yes. I liked the relationship between Ryan and his dad, even though once everything that happened with Ryan and Graham panned out by the end of Series 11, for Series 12 they were basically spare parts. I adore the ending of Can You Hear Me? With Yaz at the side of the road. Like, that scene, I've gone over it so many times, that scene breaks me every time. I think that was wonderfully executed. I think that Graham was a breath of fresh air as a companion who is very self-aware, who brings a sandwich around with him because he gets hungry. I love that. I think it's really cool that he's also arguably a Chris Chibnall like self-insert character, and I admire that audacity. I really do. And I think John Bishop was really fun, but John Bishop, Dan, hardly does anything across Doctor Who Flux, exemplified in Survivors of the Flux, where they go to Joseph Williamson's tunnel, they go to the Great Wall of China to do that message, they find your dog, they do all of that, and then all of a sudden, at the beginning of The Vanquishers, the Doctor splits herself to be a part of all of the subplots, and then, oh, okay, she just finds the companions in Joseph Williamson's tunnels, and then she takes point, and then the companions don't have anything to do in The Vanquishers. Survivors of the Flux is a wasted episode when it comes to the companions. They're globe-hopping for no purpose to the story. They're globe-hopping, and it doesn't go anywhere. And I understand in Flux that they separated Jodie Whittaker and Mandip Gill and John Bishop and gave them their own subplots and different areas and different locations and everything, so that if one of them got COVID, it wouldn't shut down the entirety of production. That's why, according to the commentary of The Power of the Doctor with Chris Chibnall, Jodie Whittaker and Mandip Gill, that's why Flux is structured the way it is. At the beginning of War of the Sontarans, the Doctor, Dan and Yaz get separated, and they don't really convene properly again until the end of Once Upon Time, only for them to split up again at the beginning of Village of the Angels, and then they don't find each other again until the beginning of The Vanquishers. The reason that's happened is so that if one of them gets COVID or has to self-isolate, the entire show doesn't grind to a halt, the filming schedule. That makes sense. I get it. But instead of using that opportunity to give the companions something to do, Chris Chibnall instead just has them meander in subplots, only for the Doctor to find them in the end, and then she just yells at them to get back in the TARDIS and to not ask questions. And then the cycle repeats. I really wish they talked more about Ryan's dyspraxia. So do I, especially in the recent years I have been diagnosed myself with dyspraxia. And there's a couple of things that I get, like looking back. Like in Orphan 55, I like Ryan at the beginning of that story, and his low self-esteem and his social awkwardness is manifesting because of his dyspraxia at the beginning of Orphan 55, but it is something that really should have been front and center more. I'm so sorry. Don't be sorry. Dyspraxia is just it's fine. You don't need to be sorry. I am who I am, and if it wasn't for my dyspraxia, you probably wouldn't have a Mr. TARDIS YouTube channel, because it's one of my hyper obsessions. I also think that looking back at the Stephen Moffat era, it was able to mix up the companion dynamics just by sheer variety of the TARDIS teams. For example, you could spin a wheel during the Stephen Moffat era, and realistically, for the first 5 stories that the wheel lands on, you'll have a different TARDIS team and TARDIS dynamic for every story you land on. Okay, Beast Below, it's the 11th Doctor and Amy. Okay, it's Day of the Moon, so it's the 11th Doctor, it's Amy, it's Rory, and it's River Song. Let's go again. Okay, it's the Girl Who Waited, it's 11, Amy and Rory. Let's go. Okay, it's the 12th Doctor and Bill, 12th Doctor and Nardole and Bill, the 11th Doctor and Clara. Like, they were mixing up the dynamics, like, very, very regularly. And I liked that a lot in terms of, like, mixing up the formula and mixing up the TARDIS team. That allowed characters which otherwise could have gone stagnant in a season to find new dynamics over the course of the stories, and find new dynamics and new interplays to poke fun at and experiment with over what was a pretty lengthy tenure. I think that Amy and Rory stayed on for half a season too long, and Clara stayed on for like 5 seasons too long. And I know she was on for less than 5 seasons, but it feels like she stayed on for 5 seasons too long. And then all of a sudden in Series 10, you've got Bill and Nardole, who are a terrific TARDIS team. If Capaldi ever does Big Finish, Capaldi, Matt Lucas and Pearl Mackie, that's the TARDIS team I want to see explored more. I love their dynamics so much. And then when you look back to the original Russ T. Davies era, when growing up, Russ T. Davies did not want to be the Doctor. He wanted to be the companion. And I think he wrote the stories with that in mind, as like an almost wish fulfillment thing, where you've got the Doctor who falls in love with the companion, or the companions have very active roles in the stories that they're in for the most part, or even in stories like, I don't know why my mind went to this, Unicorn and the Wasp. Even though Donna does not really contribute much plot-wise to the story, she's the audience surrogate for the murder mystery, so that she's somebody who can point things out and have things explained to her. But Catherine Tate's just so much fun. Like, if Graham and Yaz and Dan and Ryan had a scene like the poisoning scene from Unicorn and the Wasp, like if they had one of those every season or so, then that would really change the memorability rating of all of these characters. I posted this on Twitter, got 2,500 likes. The Doctor absolutely has favourites. And this is from the End of Time Part 2, when the 10th Doctor gives the Wilf family a lottery ticket, and it turns out to be a winning lottery ticket from a triple rollover next week. Compare that to the end of The Power of the Doctor, where the 13th Doctor drops Dan off, and he's homeless. His home has been shrunk in the Halloween apocalypse. And Dan says, I'll be keeping on my mum and dad's sofa tonight. And the Doctor just leaves. Like, she doesn't bring the house back. She doesn't drop him off at his parents' house. Like, this is just pure companion neglect. Like, I'm not saying that every companion should get a winning lottery ticket, or their own cloned version of the Doctor, or in a deleted scene for the end of Journey's End, the Doctor gives them a piece of coral to grow their own TARDIS. But this is just straight up neglect. Like, even Graham and Ryan got psychic paper, and probably a job at UNIT. Like, oh my god. She gets a lottery ticket, Dan sleeps on the sofa. This is terrible. It really is. And I think Chris Chibnall hated companion departures, and not in like an emotional way, like, oh, I hate saying goodbye, I'm going to be like the 11th Doctor and I'm going to tear out the last page of the book. He just hates resolutions, he just hates writing them. Because in Revolution of the Daleks, how does Captain Jack depart that story? Through hastily done ADR, and a reference to Gwen fighting off Daleks with boxing gloves. He doesn't get a goodbye scene there. How does Dan leave? Just gets dropped off at the beginning of the incited incident of the story, and he only turns up at the very end to do that companion support group bit. How do Tegan and Ace leave the story in The Power of the Doctor? Off screen. The Doctor falls unconscious at the end of that story. Then Yaz drops them off home in the TARDIS, and by the time the 13th Doctor has woken up, they've gone. All that resolution is just completely gone. Chibnall just does not like writing departures, which means that they are such hollow endings, which is why, in comparison, an ending like Revolution of the Daleks, where they actually do say goodbye, and you've got that brilliant image of Ryan explaining his thought process while the door of the TARDIS is illuminated behind him, that's just good direction, and like that's just smart visual storytelling. And then they put their heads together, they say bye fam, and the 13th Doctor is like actually emotionally affected by this departure at the end, and even talks about going back in time to fix things so that she doesn't abandon them for a year. You know, by comparison, that's really effective. It's a lot better than, oh, I'm kipping on my mum and dad's sofa tonight, Doctor. Hint, hint. Oh, okay. Bye, Dan, and then just leaves. To be fair, the Doctor was busy, but she's got a time machine. But do you get what I'm saying? When it comes to the companions individually as characters, there's some merit there. And I'm not going to say that, the 13th Doctor's companions were trash and there's no redeeming value. Like, they were good characters and also really well acted. Like, I do think that Bradley Walsh, in that scene at the end of Rosa, when they have to stay on the bus and participate in the arrest of an innocent woman, like, and he says, oh no, I don't want to be a part of this. Like, that breaks my heart every time. And once again, like Graham O'Brien in It Takes You Away, when he meets that mirror version of Grace and he just refuses to leave the mirror dimension. That's really great. But in terms of them contributing to the stories, in terms of them actually having a proper input into the resolutions of the main story arcs, it seemed like Chibnall just really wanted to split them up, but particularly Yaz in Series 11, where people just exposit to Yaz and that was how they got their personalities across. Like, this happens like 5 or 6 times in Series 11. It was frustrating to watch at the time, and it's even more frustrating in hindsight, now that in the 2022 specials they tried to push a pseudo maybe will they or won't they romance between the 13th Doctor and Yaz, when she really hasn't done anything to earn that on screen. There's some cool ideas like Yaz trying to learn to fly the TARDIS, but this all happens off screen. I would love a Big Finish box set, or like a trilogy of adventures or something, with Yaz, Graham and Ryan, and also Ryan's dad to a lesser extent, during that gap year between the Timeless Children and Revolution of the Daleks. I would like to see a story like that, similar to what they've done with Rose in the Dimension Canon and the Year of Martha Jones and stuff, a companion-led box set to fill in those gaps, but these are gaps that really should have been not even necessarily filled, but alluded to and given pathos and credence in the actual TV show proper. What's the Year of Martha Jones? It's a Big Finish box set that they released last December, I think. Yeah, the Year of Martha Jones. This came out last December. I reviewed it on stream. It's a box set that takes place during the year that Martha Jones was travelling the Earth. It stars Freem Rajaman. It's pretty good. You should check it out. Not every companion needs to be 100% relevant to every story that they're in. But looking back on the 13th Doctor's era, I genuinely cannot think of a single time where the companions were instrumental in the resolution of any episode. Sans the power of the Doctor, but even then the Hollow Doctor was the one who was taking point, was the one who was telling them what to do and instructing them to do it. Like, what happens with Yaz in the power of the Doctor is that, the Doctor body swaps with the Master, and the Master brings Yaz on board as the companion, and then Yaz pushes the Master onto that mushroom planet and then leaves, comes back with Vinda. The Master takes her back to the palace for whatever reason. We have no idea why. And then the Hollow Doctor instructs Yaz to use the screwdriver and to put the regeneration energy back into the big Time Lord Gallifreyan cube. And then it's the Doctor who does the rest of the story, and Yaz just carries her off when she gets hit by the laser. There's basically nothing to Yaz's presence in that story, and it's still one of her best stories, which is how poor the standard has been of implementing the companions into the A-plot of this era. The fam started off as a really interesting and cool dynamic that even harkened back to season 1 of Doctor Who, with the TARDIS Quartet that was more of an ensemble cast. But by series 12, Graham and Ryan were absolutely hangers-on, and then by the time Flux happened, it was just the Doctor show, which is fine, but the companions were more than redundant. Remember when people were calling it Clara Who? Yeah, there is a good middle ground between Clara being the most important person in the whole of creation to, okay, maybe the companions will actually do something this week. Who knows? We're 30 episodes in and we're waiting for Yaz to do something.